Hello, everyone. It's about time to start, and I don't want to delay it anymore. So thank you so much for finding time in your busy schedule to come today for our distinguished lecture, Gloriana St. Clair Lecture in 21st Century Librarianship, offered by an invited speaker from University of Leeds. Now I would like to pass the word to the Dean of Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar to give some welcoming remarks and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Tatiana. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar. If you don't know me, I'm Michael Schrick. I'm the Dean here. So before I introduce our speaker today, I'd like to share with you a little background on the CMUQ Distinguished Lecture Series. At this campus, we host experts in many fields of study, from institutions and organizations all around the world. We created the Distinguished Lecture Series to share this scholarship with the Qatar community. Today's discussion is part of the Gloriana St. Clair Distinguished Lecture in the 21st Century Librarianship series. This series was named in honor of a longtime CMU Dean of Libraries who is now emerita. Gloriana St. Clair led the transformation of Carnegie Mellon Libraries into the 21st century, supporting and serving both CMU students and our research community. Our guest today is a leader in digital transformation, user experience, learning spaces, innovation cultures, and open education and research. Did I miss anything?
That's great.
Okay, very good. Masud Khokhar is the Chief Digital and Information Officer at the University of Leeds. A computer scientist by education, Masud is passionate about digital leadership in the changing library and archive environments. Before joining the University of Leeds in 2021, Masud held senior roles at Oxford's Bodleian Libraries, Lancaster University, and the University of York. He is chair of the Research Libraries UK, a consortium of the 39 leading and most significant research libraries in the UK and Ireland. He also serves on the White Rose Libraries Executive Board as an external member of the Cambridge University Library Syndicate, provides guidance and support to the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council on research infrastructures. Today, he's going to talk to us about how libraries are evolving from passive repositories to active agents of change. Please join me in welcoming Masud Khokhar to the Distinguished Lecture Series. Masud.
Right. Firstly, let me just start by saying what an absolute honor and privilege it is to be here. And thank you, Dean, for such an amazing welcome. And thank you, Tatiana, for inviting me over for this absolutely fantastic opportunity to share some of my thoughts and hopefully live up to the wonderful work that Gloriana St. Clair did as the transformation of CMUQ. I am slightly walking kind of presenter, so I will be in the middle here. But what I thought I'll do is I'll share some of my thoughts with you about where I think the libraries are going in the future, and particularly what some of the challenges are which we are facing from the kind of surrounding environments that we have at this time. Whether they are technological surrounding environments, whether they're geopolitical, whether they're regulatory, there are so many moving parts around us, and how do we cope with that, but also what opportunities do we avail in that transformation. But before I do all of that, let me give you a little bit of background, because it's always easy to contextualize things when you know a little bit about where I've come from, what I'm going to talk about. So let me just talk a little bit about Leeds. So we are in the northern part of England, not UK, because Scotland gets very unhappy with us when we say we are the north of UK. But Leeds is a big city in the UK. I think it's the 5th or 6th largest city in terms of size of population. But it's also the largest outside of London when it comes to being a financial sector or a government sector, but also a very big health technology sector emerging in Leeds as well. And I thought I'll share some random facts about the city, some really interesting and probably some not so interesting ones. So firstly, it has huge industrial heritage. So big coal mining happened in Leeds, big textile industries happened in Leeds. But it's also where a lot of technological innovations came out in the UK. So the very first flight that happened in the UK happened through Leeds. The very first steam train that happened in Leeds, as well as many, many other things. Marks and Spencer originated in Leeds. So yeah, good, interesting pedigree and history in that context. Also, the very first internet emerged in the city of Leeds, which I think is quite a positive thing to state. There are lots and lots of global impact, but I've picked 3 random, very bizarre ones. So I don't know, anyone have played Cluedo, the board game? That originated from Leeds. Also mousetraps. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but one of those really nasty ones that really capture the mice, that also came out of Leeds. The one I take real pride in is the fizzy drinks came out of Leeds. So it was an accident that happened with Joseph Priestley, and turned out he invented carbonated water, and that basically originated all the background to fizzy drinks. But what Leeds is really, really famous for now is its health technology sector, and there's a lot of health technology-based things going on. So University of Leeds had several Nobel Prize winners, but the 2 that I'm mentioning, the father and son duo, they basically devised X-ray technology, particularly the word that I cannot say, X-ray crystallography. So that came from Leeds. The very first cardiothoracic surgery happened in Leeds in the UK. The very first double hand transplant ever in the UK happened in Leeds. So big on health technology and health sector itself. University of Leeds is one of the largest universities in Leeds. It's not the only university. There are 4 universities in Leeds, but it's the largest research-intensive university in Leeds. I'm very cautious of when I say large, because large means very different things to different people. In American context, this might be a middle-sized university, but in the UK context, it is definitely a large university. I think, again, we are the 5th largest university in terms of student population. So we've got about 40,000 students, about 10,000 staff, roughly about 5,500 professional, 4,500 academic. As well as we are a founding member of Russell Group. We are a World Top 100 University, founded in 1904, and we are quite a strong values-based university, so we do a lot of values-based work in our mission, both civic and global in that context. I don't think I wanted to say any more, but the images might give you a little bit of flavor of Leeds. And you may have noticed it never rains in Leeds. That is by design. All these pictures are showing that it never rains in Leeds, but as you know, it rains a lot in the UK. The University of Leeds Libraries, so we are a system of libraries. We have 5 library sites, 4 on campus, 1 off campus. We have a very strong partnership with NHS Leeds, which is our health service. And the 5th library site is on the hospital site for that reason. The picture that you see is of the Brotherton Research Library. That's our founding library, actually one of the original founding libraries, built in the 1930s. It has a beautiful circular reading room, almost as nice as this room, I would say. So please do come along if you ever get a chance, and it would be a pleasure to host you over there as well. But we also have 3 other library sites on campus, as well as the Brotherton Research Center, which is based in the library, and 2 public access galleries, one focusing on our special collections and heritage, and one on our art collection. And all of the public art on campus also comes under the library remit. The thing that I really wanted to mention was this vision that we produced back in 2021 called Knowledge for All. And the reason why I wanted to mention that was very early on we were focusing on the concept of knowledge and what does the future of knowledge means. And I think that's what I'll cover in some of the talk today as well. So let me, even before I go into the knowledge, or maybe I usually used to have a slide here which talks about me, but I've decided I'm not going to do that. But I'm not a normal librarian in many ways. I'm a computer scientist by education, so all of my degrees are in computer science. So that's why digital thinking and digital transformation is quite strong for me. And very recently, about 2 months ago, I moved away from the role of the university librarian into Chief Digital Information Officer for that very reason. So if you're wondering what that role covers, that covers the accountability for all the libraries, but it also covers accountability for IT services and also the digital transformation of the university. I'm also the AI lead for the university, so I can talk about AI in any shape or form that you would like to. Right, so what I want to talk about is the environment and disruption as a wicked challenge. And one thing that libraries are is we're already working in a complex nested system. So the library themselves is a system of systems. And then we are part of organizations which are themselves a system. but we are also focused on serving the needs of our society, which is a system in its own right. So we are already in a complex system, which means that when disruption happens around us, regardless of whether that's organizational disruption, whether that's societal disruption, geopolitical, all of those things have an impact on what we do and how we operate. And that leads to, or has increasingly now led to, the sense of a wicked problem. We cannot solve it anymore, but we are trying to identify different parts of that problem and trying to solve them independently. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. One of the big wicked challenges that I think we are now facing is about knowledge stewardship. And knowledge stewardship is not new to libraries. It's something we've done for a long period of time. But we've looked at, in the past, particularly from a knowledge management lens, and I'm basically arguing that we need to look at it from a knowledge stewardship lens. And I will tell you a little bit about what the difference is as well. But as with anyone intelligent, you basically ask the Google AI, what is the difference, or how do you define knowledge stewardship? And I was just really trying to understand whether an AI response would be what I consider knowledge stewardship as well. And it is very close, particularly about the process of responsibly and strategically managing basically both organizational and societal knowledge at this time to ensure that they're effectively used, preserved, and shared for current and future benefit. I think there are many, many elements here. Firstly, what does responsible management looks like? What does strategic management look like? But also the difference between use, preservation, sharing. What are those elements around knowledge? And also, benefit for whom? Who in the society will benefit from this knowledge as well? So there are lots of facets that we'll try to tackle. But before all of that, let's talk a little bit about how we have shaped and shifted the economy that we are working in. So one of the things that I often say is, when I'm talking to colleagues, what is the different currencies that we see in the kind of environment that we are in? And a lot of us are very familiar with data, and particularly at CMU, data science would be big, AI would be big, computing in general would be big. And data itself is a huge amount of knowledge is the wrong word to do, a huge kind of pieces of potential knowledge that are non-organized and non-contextualized. We saw emergence of data science as a big subject. We saw huge amounts of currency shift from a structured knowledge system to a data-based, non-structured systems. And that basically led to a huge new formation of currency. Data was the currency. People, big companies were not interested in what they're offering you. Of course, they were offering you something, but what they were interested in harvesting as much data as possible to become more personalized, more intelligent in their information delivery. Information is just that data synthesized, and knowledge is when you add experiences, lived experiences, contextualization on top of that information to make it really, really deep and informational from a synthesis perspective. Why am I mentioning all of this? Primarily because Peter Drucker back in 1969 talked about the concept of knowledge economy. And he talked about knowledge economy and knowledge worker in his book called The Age of Discontinuity, if I remember correctly. And what he was talking about is that the future of our economy would be driven by knowledge workers. Now, I'm absolutely not disputing that. I think that's absolutely the right way to describe it. And then Peter also wrote a series of short essays. And in 2001, he recalibrated and he said that actually the knowledge economy may or may not have fully realized, but he is absolutely sure that the next society is coming. And then the next society would be a knowledge society. So basically the idea is that every economy that's generated leads to a different form of society. Industrial revolutions have led to a more modern focused society. We've moved away from labor-focused environments to more computing-based environments. The computing itself has changed the economy and the society. And in the future, we will have a knowledge society. Again, I don't disagree with that, but I think Peter's anticipation of how quickly that knowledge society will happen needs recalibration. And what that means from my perspective is that the fundamental principle of that, which Peter back in 1969 definitely, and probably in 2001 were the early stages, he never realized the expansion of how quickly the data economy will rise. We've had vast amounts of data now. In fact, there is a very interesting statistic that you would have already seen many, many times, and it's been valid for the last 5 or 7 years, that every time you ask, 90% of the data was produced in the last 2 years. So the expansion of data is so exponential that even if you calibrate it in the last 7 years, every year the data expands by a huge, huge amount of margin. That's leading to a significant information overload. And in order to compensate for that information overload, we are now moving into an algorithmic economy. A lot of algorithms are processing a lot of that information to give us insights that we need, because humans cannot process that anymore. And ultimately, that should lead to knowledge economy, but we haven't actually reached there yet. What was really interesting about the data economy is that it didn't just change our mind from a structural knowledge system to a non-structured data system. It just completely rechanged the value proposition. There was no more value, and I'm dissing my own profession here slightly, so apologies. The value moved away from actual knowledge synthesis to quick data processing. And that has led to a huge amount of issues, whether that is about fake information, misinformation, disinformation, just particular narratives of information. There have been a lot of issues that have led from moving away from knowledge synthesis to just database information outcomes. And embracing data economy is something that libraries were slow at. We could have done it more quickly. We could have actually realized some of the potential impacts of this more quickly. But hindsight is a great thing. When we look back and look at that, we think, oh, if only we would have taken some real ownership and real leadership in some of these areas. What we are now seeing a lot of is that data economy wanting people to just provide instant gratification. We are also seeing a big economic change. We are no longer product-based economies, we are platform-based economies. Firstly, Amazon. Does Amazon provide prime deliveries here in Qatar?
No.
Okay. Bad example then. But one of the things I would use in that context, and there must be similar parallels, is that we are now seeing more and more platforms doing a lot of things that multiple companies or multiple products used to do. So in the UK, I will use Amazon for my, whether I should do or not is a different question, but I can use Amazon for my grocery shopping, I can use Amazon for my package deliveries, I'm using Amazon for my web services, for my all kinds of things in a single place, and convenience has become a very big thing. Similarly, majority of the big monopolies are about platform economies, they're not about product economies anymore. And that we are seeing bigger and bigger emphasis on that over time. The same concept is also happening with knowledge. People are trying to harvest knowledge as much as possible. So we are seeing the same monopolies that used to have platform economies are now also seeing knowledge economies. So if I tell you the top 6 AI companies are all names that you would be familiar with, and all of them tend to originate as in AI companies. The big one is NVIDIA. At the moment, it's got $4.4 trillion economy valuation. That's after US and China, the 3rd largest country. If you look at GDP valuations, NVIDIA could be the 3rd largest country in its own right. Microsoft recently almost touched $4 trillion valuation as well, 3.88 trillion. That's bigger than Germany. That's bigger than UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia all combined together. So that's the scale at which they're operating. But none of them originated as AI companies. They are NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Apple. They were all product-based companies which are now becoming increasingly platform-based providers. We have been slow at that. And actually, as universities or libraries can't compete with that, and we have to be open and honest about that. But we are now living in the algorithmic economy. And that's a bit different to data economy. We have huge amounts of data. We have huge amount of information overload. It's caused lots of problems, whether that's misinformation, disinformation, algorithmic polarization. But we are now in the algorithmic economy. And I think there's first question that I'll pose back to us. Do libraries and educational institutions have a role to take ownership of some of these algorithms now? Again, some of this is huge. Like, again, if you look back at who is generating some of the most popular models and algorithms, it's still those corporate monopolies. In fact, if I look back at who's produced the largest number of AI models, notable AI models, US has produced 40 notable AI models in last year, 2024, followed by China with 15, followed by European Union at 3. And that's a whole set of countries working together. None of those have come from higher education institutions. They've all benefited from higher education research, but none of those have actually come out from higher education institutions. So again, we are seeing more and more algorithmic monopolies that are also coming. And when that happens, does anyone want to guess how many of these companies actually follow the responsible AI guidelines that OECD, UN, European Union, African Council have introduced? At the moment, all of these corporate monopolies have zero responsible AI followership for those algorithms. So there is something in there for us to really start thinking about what we do. So governments are taking an interest, but corporate monopolies are not. Anyway, what I really wanted to highlight is that shift from structural knowledge systems to what the future would look like. And again, nobody can really predict the future, but I have some thoughts. And I will share some of those thoughts. But first and foremost, I think, why do we do all of these things? Like, why do these digital tools and technologies flourish? Why do these algorithms? They are for the benefit of society. And actually, one thing that we really do have an opportunity here is to start asking for more. Start asking for more from our government, start asking for more from corporate monopolies that we use. What do we use these algorithms for? And ideally, they should be for the betterment of society. And I think that should be the core principle of everything we do. I can have a very interesting debate if you don't agree with that, but I personally think that everything should be for the betterment of society. By the way, I'm not against capitalism or actually corporate profit. I think those are absolutely critical parts, but ultimately they should also lead to betterment of society. The combination of unlimited data and the algorithmic economy does produce a very good opportunity. And particularly, it has a huge impact on us. So in the UK, there was a report that was asked by the government department called Business, Energy and Industrial Systems, I think BEIS. It's no longer called that. That's why I'm forgetting. In the UK, they change the government names every time something happens. They asked PricewaterhouseCoopers to do an analysis of how many of the UK jobs will be impacted by AI. But the most important question or point to consider here is they asked them to do this in 2021. So ChatGPT has not become public access yet. People's knowledge of AI is not massive yet. And the outcome of that was that they said within the next 10 years, 7% of all jobs will have an impact on AI, based on AI. And by 2030, 23 to 24% of all jobs will be impacted by AI. And this was with the hindsight that they've not seen the impact of generative AI just yet. So if that was the case back then, we will absolutely see a massive impact of AI on the job market. And that could be a positive thing or a negative thing, depending on how you look at that. That takes us to the question of the next society. So Peter Drucker was talking about the next society as being the knowledge society. There's been also a debate about what comes after the knowledge society. And this debate is taking us towards this fact that if we are all knowledge workers and there's unlimited amount of really good knowledge across the place, how would we consume that knowledge? How would we actually experience that knowledge? And the concept is leading towards the imagination society, that the next society would be about imagination, about creativity, about how we use that knowledge to deliver more interesting things. They're referring to it as Society 5.0. Personally, I think imagination is the wrong word. I would call it experiential society rather than imagination society. And the reason behind that is actually, again, more and more case studies are now indicating that the best form of learning is experiential. The best form of experiences are which have a tactile impact. So there's a really interesting going back to the original forms of how learning, how human connections, how other things were built. But again, technology have a role to play in that, particularly when it comes to VR, AR, immersive experiences, etc. Right, so here are the set of opportunities that I think we can embrace at this time. So talked about the fact that we are living in the algorithmic economy. It does generate a few amounts of areas that we can now focus on. Now, once again, libraries were doing these things for quite some time, particularly some parts of it, critical thinking, is something that libraries have been supporting for quite some time, and so is information literacies. That's core bread and butter of what libraries do. But the importance of those things are now greater than ever before. And also the kinds of information literacies we do has changed and shifted over time. I'm not going to go through all of these because otherwise I'll be here for another 30 minutes. But what I will talk about is 4 big challenges or 4 big opportunities, looking at whichever dimension you pick on. And how or what we can do as libraries and information professionals in that area. So the first one is, in my view, is about knowledge equity. So for a long period of time, we have a Western knowledge system and other knowledge systems. And there's been a very dominant narrative of Western knowledge system is the knowledge system to rule them all. And I think that's now being challenged really effectively. If it comes to, firstly, who can access knowledge, I think that's becoming very interesting, particularly with open research, open education, open infrastructures. I think we're looking at broadening of access to knowledge. But more interestingly, I think if we really want to solve the global sustainable challenges, we also need to think about co-production of knowledge. Knowledge production in contextualized contexts will be the most important things. We cannot, the way in which we predict earthquakes and its impact in the US or in the UK is not the same as it will be in Ghana or Kenya. The way their population mobilizes is very different to the population mobilization here. The way the alert systems work is completely different, so knowledge production and knowledge application is a lot more contextualized in that context. Similarly, we are seeing a huge amount of biodiversity-based knowledge systems that are coming from indigenous knowledge systems rather than Western knowledge systems, and really acknowledgement of those areas. So knowledge equity is quite an important thing. And that's not just about an ethical dilemma. I think if you just look at AI as well, what is AI being primarily trained on? Western, English language knowledge systems. Hopefully there is more localized initiatives going on in Qatar and UAE, but local languages matter. They really do matter in those contexts. And local knowledge systems matter. Oral knowledge systems will be very different to textual-based knowledge systems. So I think all of those things, knowledge equity will be a very, very critical part in that. The second one is about knowledge security. With the amount of geopolitical issues that we are seeing, US government introducing tariffs, which have an impact on all kinds of things, but also who do you believe is your ally in those situations or not? All of those are having an impact on how knowledge is protected. The narratives that are being shifted are all over the place. We've seen this happen a lot of places. So my original background is from Pakistan. I know that the decolonization curriculum is disappearing from every Oxford University and Cambridge University press in that curriculum, because that's not a narrative that needs to be told anymore. There's a directed erasure of history going on. We've seen that curriculum change in India as well, where the Mughal Empire is leaving out from the chapters of curriculum. We're seeing that in the US, and attacks on knowledge, book banning, all that kind of stuff. We are also seeing that in the UK, where libraries are increasingly getting requests to remove certain amounts of content from their shelves. And that's just not on if we really want to, unless it's unlawful. I think there shouldn't be any kind of censorship, in my view, on knowledge. So knowledge security becomes really important. But this is not just an imperative on protecting intellectual, digital, and cultural heritage. We're also seeing direct attacks on knowledge. We're also seeing, it's trusted research environments a concept here. We're seeing a huge amount of trusted research environment concepts in the UK now, where they're saying, who can you do research with? So at the moment, for example, China and Iran are basically taken out. You cannot now do research on 6 national security priorities over there. So how do you share knowledge with them? If you're doing a collaboration with them, what knowledge can you share and what you can't share? So there's a really interesting dimension on knowledge security that is emerging around that. Knowledge ethics, particularly how disparities in knowledge exist, hierarchies of knowledge, colonization. I've talked a lot about this. I won't delve into too much. But with knowledge ethics, I also want to talk about technology ethics as well. And I also want to highlight one particular role for libraries is not just about our own organizations, but also about the populations that we serve. So there was a very interesting case study that we recently saw in the UK, which was about job recruitment. And there was a company, I won't name names, which basically said, we're offering this job, can you record a 2-minute video to share with us, just telling us what your motivation for applying for this job is. And then they put an AI algorithm in the background to determine whether the person looked motivated enough based on their facial expressions. Now, that is really problematic. Firstly, they should have told that in advance. I think that's the very first thing, that's how they will process this. But two, all of us have a different way of expressing motivation. If you're neurodiverse, you may not be showing motivation, except that you might be extremely motivated for the job. So there are some really interesting issues about what ethical dilemmas might emerge as the economy itself becomes more algorithmic and more automated in that concept. And how do we really go back to the citizen rights in that particular concept? How do we ensure that citizens know how their information is being processed, whether it's ethical or not, what their rights are in that context, etc. So that knowledge and technology ethics is becoming a really interesting domain for library and information professionals. And last but not least, it's also changing our own curatorial practice on how we operate. So information literacies, we are used to that. But if I go and say, are we used to media literacies? Probably not so much. Can we teach our students / members of public / ourselves about what they're seeing on the TV is real or not? Have they taken different categorizations / contextualizations into account? How are they analyzing that information? So information literacies, critical thinking, media literacies are all coming together in that particular kind of area as well. And we are moving away from custodianship to stewardship. Previously, libraries have been very much about building collections. In fact, we used to joke, at least in the UK, that people used to associate their importance by the size of collection they had. And if you say, I've got 3 million items in my collection, that's a better librarianship sign than if you have a million or less. That's just obsolete thinking in our world. I think it's not about custodianship. It is not about keeping knowledge. It is not about protecting in that particular context. It is about sharing, but with all the right context on top of that. It is about using and building the capabilities and capacities of other colleagues to decipher and use that knowledge in the best possible fashion. So we are moving away from custodianship into stewardship in that concept. Right. So this takes me back to the definition of what is a library. And I know this is very old school, but I really wanted to mention this because I am definitely proposing that we should change this, but not by much. So this is a definition that George Eberhardt presented in the ALA Chicago edition in 2010. And it says a library is a collection of resources in a variety of formats that is organized by information professionals or other experts who provide convenient bibliographic, digital, physical, or intellectual access, offer target services or programs with the mission of educating, informing, and entertaining a variety of audiences. And the goal of stimulating is stimulating individual learning and advancing society as a whole. It's a really, really good definition. But what it's not taking into account is the algorithmic economy. It's not taking into the account of what we are experiencing now. So my proposal is to slightly change it. And this is what I would like to change it to. I need to go and say hello to George and say whether he's so happy with this or not. But basically, what I'm suggesting is that we are not just organizing resources anymore. We are also enhancing and enriching resources. We are adding our own professionalism, our own expertise into the mix now. I'm moving away from the word information professionals to move to Peter Drucker's original concept of knowledge society and knowledge professionals. Information professionals often highlight that we are able to decipher data into logical outcomes. I think we are increasingly now aware of the context in which we work, the lived experiences of our students, the lived experiences of our society, and we can add that. I also say that libraries are the only place, maybe libraries and IT services in the whole of the university, that look after education, research, public engagement, and all other side of things. Not many parts can say that, so I think that's a really positive thing as well. I'm also suggesting that this is about providing convenient bibliographic, algorithmic, or intellectual access, expertise, and insights. So it's not just about access, it's also about expertise and insights that we bring to the table through physical and digital channels, offer targeted platforms. In an ideal world, that would be great. In a real world, we are definitely not there. And last but not least, I'm adding the concept of energizing imagination. I think with the kind of vast amounts of information that is out there, it is our responsibility to really excite and energize the imagination of our audiences. And I think that would be a really important facet of what we do in the future. Right, so I've talked a lot about what I'm thinking, but let me give you some practical examples of what we are embracing at the University of Leeds to achieve some of this. The first and foremost thing I would say is that we are taking a leadership role. So libraries previously have been service providers, and we still have a service provider role, but increasingly we are partners and leaders in a lot of these debates. So what I'll talk a little bit about is what we are doing with AI Hub at the university, and particularly what we are doing in relation to the leadership with AI. I'll talk a little bit about the establishment of Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub that we established about 3 years ago, really forecasting that digital creativity will become a big theme. We have a culture of continuous improvement. So Kaizen is our approach, a Japanese approach about really thinking about transdisciplinary approaches of continuous improvement. We generally believe in radical collaboration, and I was having a very lovely chat before this about the concept of Education City here and how fantastic it is to see a collaborative endeavor rather than a competitive endeavor. If we are really tackling global challenges, we can't tackle them through competition. We really need to start thinking about radical collaboration on that. And lastly, we are also building and establishing a knowledge institute in the library itself, which will be a flagship institute at the University of Leeds and in the UK in that context as well. Right, AI Hub and leadership. So again, just some examples of what we've done. So firstly, back in 2022, ChatGPT has not become public yet. We hired our very first research officer of AI in the libraries, really starting to think about what the future of AI would look like for libraries, archives, museums, and information professionals. Dr. Luba Pergova-Morgan was hired as a postdoc in that context. She worked with us for about a year and ultimately resulted in this report called Looking Towards a Brighter Future, which is publicly accessible. Although, considering it came out in 2023, it's probably already way out of date by now. We've also basically taken a very strong leadership role in convening the AI action plan across the university. Just to give you what our action plan components look like, this is a series of 12 things that we do. We did a lot of conversations before we came onto this. We spoke with Oxford, we spoke with Yale. Yale did a massive amount of investment, $150 million in their AI plan. And we looked at a lot of different places and how they are looking at it, particularly UBC in Canada as well, University of British Columbia, who've been really big supporters of what we are doing, and we have been taking inspiration from them as well. Starting from institutional AI positioning to AI governance, so we've really streamlined AI governance because you can't, the standard university processes would have taken us 8 months to go through anything. To operational delivery, we've got some finances sorted, we've got some sandpits and hackathons, we've looked at infrastructure, both corporate and non-corporate. So we've got a large number of Microsoft Copilot licenses, but we've also got our own walled garden infrastructures around AI as well. We've taken a completely different approach towards digital skills. So digital skills and AI skills are absolutely going to be the key. We are building 2 centers at the university at the moment, not research centers. They are practical, pragmatic skills centers. One would be Center for Digital and Data Skills, and one would be Center for Automation, and they will both be embracing AI fully in the background, etc., etc., etc. But the most important thing I wanted to point out here is that the library is convening this. Library is at the heart of this. We are the cross-functional unit of the university, so actually can tackle a lot of these things. Now, individually, there is a completely different group that is working on AI sandpits. There's a completely different group which is looking at cross-disciplinary AI Research Institute, but all of them are coordinated by the library in that context. We also hosted a major digital summit back in 2024 called AI and Me. There will be another one which will be Microsoft-led this year. And again, the main thing there is to really start conversations around AI and really showcase the central role of the library in that. So what's really interesting about this, and this is why I selected these pictures, is that you've got all the top senior university leaders, so from Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research, Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education, the Chief Operating Officer, professors in AI research, but also Dean for Digital Transformation, Anthology, Microsoft, all senior leaders are there. And the library is a deep partner in that. there are also library colleagues doing talks at the same time about what this is looking. And I think that's, again, a partnership role that we've been building on for some time. I also mentioned digital creativity and cultures. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's happening in that area. So again, this was a kind of a trial for us. So we established it 3 years ago to really see what the future of digital humanities would look like. It's still emerging and it's still growing. It's in its growth phase at this time. But I picked 3 examples just to highlight again what the library is doing. So first and foremost, the digital humanities unit, which is Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub, is again based in the libraries. So we are really embracing the libraries as labs concept and really building lots and lots of different kinds of labs, including this one over there. And the 3 images tell 3 different stories. So I'm going to tell you these stories in like 2 minutes. The very first one on the left is a startup story. So this came because we have a large numismatics collection, a large coin collection in Leeds. And these coins are all digitized, but they are all digitized in 2D. And what we really wanted to do was to do 3D textures so people can view them from across the world, can really understand the dimensions of that. And we, through Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub, we tried about 12 different approaches on what would be the best one. And ultimately, there was one particular model that they worked with, but kind of the digitization equipment that was needed to do that is very costly. Now, we at University of Leeds can afford to do that, but not every university can. So we hired a couple of graduate interns who were working on this, who then basically designed a shoebox outcome for that. So they've put lots of different cameras, very cheap cameras, and they've put it in a shoebox. And actually that image is the result of that, where you can actually start analyzing the 3D models and 3D textures. And that's a new startup, and we are basically now as a library giving them some funding to go and start to mobilize that and see whether that would be a success or not. So that was a very interesting example of how something that wasn't really designed to be a startup has become an interesting startup. The image below is from our textile collection. So textiles have a lot of patterns, but one of the biggest issues from a climate economy is that there is a huge amount of samples that are being sent of textiles to people through mail, through international endeavors, through planes, to just experience what a textile feels like. So this is a project that was led by Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub about can we actually make textile experiences more haptic without actually having access to the textiles. So this project digitized the textiles into patterns. Then it looked at cymatics to see whether they can do sound variations of these textiles. Then we have a fantastic institute at Leeds called LITEC, which is Leeds Institute of Textile and Color, who developed this device where if you put your hand on top of that, it uses sound waves to give you a feel of how the texture would have felt for the textile. And that basically means that you don't actually have to send textiles anymore. You can basically start experiencing that. And the one on the top right is about a major conference that we brought to Leeds for the first time called the IIIF conference because of the kind of work that we're doing. Right, this is my last slide. So I talked about knowledge equity. One big thing that Leeds is a partner in, and again, this started about 3 years ago, is the Knowledge Equity Network. So this was an initiative between University of Leeds and University of Pretoria in really starting to talk about those different knowledge systems between Global North and Global South. Basically, I'm here giving you an invitation to go and explore this. It is knowledgeequitynetwork.org. We have over 400 signatories to the declaration. We have over 51 organizations which have signed. And there's a lot of interesting debate about what the future of knowledge equity would look like. I'm just going to stop talking here now, but just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. I've gone through both theoretical and practical elements in that there's so much more I can cover in any kind of conversation. But hopefully that's given you a flavor of some of the challenges that are happening in the knowledge domain, some of the opportunities that exist in the knowledge domain. Some of those opportunities we can realize as libraries and information professionals now. Some of these we might need to realize in the future. But ultimately, creativity, imagination, and taking ownership would become very, very important. I hope that's also given some inspiration, but also, more importantly, generated lots of food for thought. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your patience with me as well.
Thank you very much, Masud, for such a thought-provoking conversation. I think it was really interesting to see the shift from knowledge society to algorithmic economy, and then you showed us the way where we are moving now, imagination and experiential society. So great to know about different paradigm. We spoke about knowledge equity, knowledge ethics, knowledge security, as well as curatorial practice. And it's really important that you showed the leading role of libraries, not just service providers, but also partner in many, many institutional initiatives. I don't want to take a lot of time. We came to question period. So while you're preparing your questions, I just want to say that we are video taping this conversation, so it will be available on our website a little bit later. So if you want to revisit some of these thoughts, ideas, it will be possible. So now it's time for question. If you want to ask a question, all of you have microphones. There's a button there. You need to press it. It becomes green, and after that you can ask your question. So.
Also, you can just say, I don't agree with you, and that's equally welcome.
Ihab.
Thank you for this talk. I really appreciate all the effort that's been done to actually adjust to our challenging times. I have a question, though, with stewardship. How do you deal with the challenge as most people, including a lot of our students, get their information, not necessarily knowledge, but information on Instagram and other social media, not necessarily through actually programs that they want you're creating through the library?
So what I should have said is my own personal area of interest and research is around algorithmic polarization through social media platforms. And yes, they've been absolutely devastating in many ways. I'm going to be very frank. I think they've dumbed us as a society in general. They have increased connectivity, but generally speaking, the concept of knowledge synthesis has disappeared from our mindsets as a consequence of that. Also, the consequence of critical thinking, informed debates, finding the middle ground, compromises, that have all gone. And the reason behind that is we already have biases as humans. Intrinsically, we have biases as humans. In fact, I don't get commission from this book. I wish that I should contact them and say, I've advertised this. There's a book called Factfulness. And it basically talks about a series of human biases. It's a dense read, so I'm not recommending you to read the book, but there's a very nice TED talk for it for 20 minutes that if you're interested. But it highlights the human biases that we already have and how algorithms are actually really pushing the biases to an extreme degree now. So a good example of that would be we have a binary bias, where we say things are either bad or good. We don't say things are okay. And that's really being amplified from social media as well. So when students and population look at something, they look at that and they say, oh yeah, I agree with this, or I don't agree with this. And the reason behind that is there's so much information out there that our brain's natural tendency to absorb that is just not possible. In fact, the brain can only absorb, I think, 128 bits at any given time in every second, which is literally me talking to you and someone else saying something to you. After that, everything else is basically moved out of your brain. It cannot consume that information. So when people are looking at social media, their brain filters are already trying to further polarize them towards what they already believe in. And therefore, the narrowing of contextual information becomes even more and more stronger. And what they see, if there is anything that doesn't align with their views, they basically discard it and ultimately becomes more polarized bubble living in general. So one big role that we have is to really talk about what does it mean to synthesize knowledge more effectively? What does it mean to take multiple narratives in mind? What does it mean to disagree well? Because one of the big challenges that we have is we don't know how to disagree well, not in the kind of society we have now. If I'm on the social media and you say, oh yeah, Masud, I liked your lecture, but there were 4 things I hated about that, I'll be like, how dare you? Because it will immediately move to that sense of polarized views rather than having an informed debate about what you... I would never say that, but a lot of people do say that. So I think we have both a moral but also an educational responsibility to start bringing more narratives into the conversation. And that's why knowledge equity, knowledge synthesis, those responsibilities become more greater than ever. Whether we can achieve that or not is a different question. I don't think at the moment we can, but again, over time, if we focus on this now, it will start moving towards that direction.
Kind of piggybacking off of Ahab's question, how does the behavior that some people do where, let's say there's a conversation happening and someone asks a question, a lot of times people will just Google it or look up something on an LLM. How damaging is that to like the knowledge that libraries try to share with the world?
I think that's a very interesting question, and what I'm about to say, many people will not agree with me, and that's okay. Let me just start by putting that out. I don't think there's anything wrong in that, as long as knowledge is being synthesized and subsumed. And again, we all have biases. So this goes back to 2014, 2015 time, when Lancaster and Harvard were involved. So I was at Lancaster University back then. Lancaster and Harvard were doing a joint project on the difference between deep study and shallow study, because we are really worried about students basically watching something, listening to something while also reading a book. And we were worried about, are they actually consuming the knowledge in that particular fashion? Ultimately, after that case study came out, the answer was that yes, they are consuming. And in that, we did a lot of observational analysis. There were cases where people had a research paper on one screen, a social media YouTube video running on another, while they're also Snapchatting and texting with their other friends, and yet the consumption of knowledge was there. So I think the very first thing I would say is that it challenged my own biases and my own thinking about, is deep knowledge synthesis the only way to acquire knowledge? In some fields, yes. Probably in history, English literature, Russian literature, those kind of areas, probably yes, but it's not the de facto thing for everything. So if we are now looking at how people are consuming knowledge, and that might differ from how or what we believe in, I think that's okay. I have forgotten your question. Can you repeat your question again?
Basically, when someone looks up something to gain knowledge, they'll just look at like the first search result or just the first answer they get from an LLM.
Yeah, to be fair, that's been going on for some time. So again, it goes back to that sense of really building those literacies about, is this the right answer? Are there hallucinations in there? Is this been well cited? Have you thought about other narratives? Convenience will take over everything else. And if you notice, I added knowledge stewardship definition by asking Google, what is knowledge stewardship? That was a convenient way out. I could have phrased the whole definition myself. But actually, there's no need to do so when it is something that I already agree with. I would also say that the way generative AI is going to go, I think, again, we have a responsibility to embrace it responsibly. If we stop people from doing it, it's not going to work because convenience will take over. I think what we need to do is start talking about, actually, can you use it to generate ideas, brainstorm it, develop an outline, but then add your own concepts, and then use generative AI to refine them further. If you say just stop using it, it's never going to work. So we cannot say to people, stop using Google, stop looking at the first result, because that's what they will do. What we need to do is say, and in order for you to be a more richer global citizen, here are the other things you should also do on top of that. And some people will do and some people won't. But our responsibility is to guide, not to force.
These were very deep questions that required really detailed answer. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but what I would like to say, definitely, if you have some questions, Masud is going to stay here for reception. So please approach, continue conversation, brainstorming some ideas. Right now, I would like to invite Mike just to thank our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you can actually go back there. Okay, let's thank the speaker again. That was really insightful and interesting. So, of course, we need some artifact of this, and so I am now very delighted to provide with you this this very nice. It's not a plaque. What is it? I don't know. One of these, okay, which as a memento of your time here. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
Good, and then we can get a picture. There's the picture.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'm a very friendly guy. Just come and talk to me.
Good. Thank you all for coming out to today's lecture. We do have some food, as we always do, outside, but please be certain to talk to Masud and talk to each other about what you've heard today. Thank you all for coming out today.
Thank you.